What happens when fate traps you in a small space with the most dangerous man in the city? When panic sets in and the only comfort comes from the very person you should fear most? Sometimes the most unexpected encounters lead to the most extraordinary promises. And sometimes, being trapped is exactly where you need to be to find your freedom. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell. This story of unexpected tenderness and unbreakable promises will leave you breathless. The elevator doors slid shut with their usual soft whisper, sealing Emma Chen inside the polished steel box that would carry her to the 32nd floor of the Meridian Tower. At 6:47 p.m. on a rainy Thursday evening, the building was nearly empty. Most of the corporate workers had fled hours ago, eager to escape another soul-crushing day in their glass and concrete prison. But Emma remained, as she always did, working late into the evening at her small accounting firm on the 28th floor. At 26, Emma had built her life around predictability and safety. She arrived at work at exactly 8:15 a.m., took lunch at precisely noon, and rarely left before 7 p.m. Her colleagues often joked that you could set your watch by Emma's schedule, but they didn't understand that routine was her armor against a world that had taught her early that chaos could destroy everything in an instant. The elevator hummed its familiar tune as it began its ascent, and Emma checked her reflection in the polished doors. Her long black hair was pulled back in its usual neat bun, her conservative navy suit was wrinkle-free despite the long day, and her wire-rimmed glasses sat perfectly straight on her nose. She looked exactly like what she was, a quiet, unremarkable accountant who preferred numbers to people and solitude to social interaction. Emma had chosen accounting precisely because numbers never lied, never betrayed, never left without warning. Unlike people, unlike her father, who had walked out when she was 12, leaving behind only debt and broken promises. Unlike her mother, who had retreated so far into herself after the abandonment that Emma had essentially raised herself through her teenage years. The elevator passed the 15th floor, then the 20th, climbing steadily toward her destination. Emma was mentally reviewing the Henderson account, a complex tax situation that required her particular attention to detail, when the world suddenly lurched to a violent stop. The lights flickered once, twice, then died completely, plunging the elevator into absolute darkness. The gentle hum of machinery was replaced by an ominous silence that seemed to press against Emma's eardrums. For a moment, she stood frozen, her mind struggling to process what had happened. Then the emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in an eerie red glow that made the small space feel like the inside of a beating heart. Emma's own heart was certainly beating fast enough to match the lighting. She could feel it hammering against her ribs as the reality of her situation began to sink in. She was trapped. Emma had always harbored a deep, irrational fear of enclosed spaces, a phobia that stemmed from a childhood incident when she'd been accidentally locked in a storage closet for hours during a family gathering. The memory of that suffocating darkness, of calling for help until her voice was hoarse, of the growing certainty that no one would ever find her, came rushing back with devastating clarity. Her breathing began to quicken, shallow pants that seemed to echo loudly in the confined space. The walls felt like they were closing in, the ceiling pressing down, the floor tilting beneath her feet. Emma pressed the emergency button frantically, again and again, but no reassuring voice crackled through the speaker. "Help!" she whispered, then louder. "Help! Someone help me!" But the building was nearly empty, and her voice seemed to be swallowed by the red-tinged darkness. Panic began to claw at her chest, a living thing with sharp talons that made it impossible to breathe properly. She was going to die in here, alone and forgotten, just like she'd always feared. That's when she heard it. A soft ding that indicated the elevator had somehow resumed its journey. But that was impossible. The power was out, the emergency lights were on, and she was clearly stuck between floors. Yet the familiar sound of the elevator's arrival chimed through the small space. The doors slid open. Emma blinked in confusion, expecting to see the familiar hallway of one of the office floors. Instead, she found herself looking at a man who made her breath catch in her throat for entirely different reasons than her claustrophobia. He was tall, probably 6'3", with the kind of presence that seemed to fill any space he occupied. His dark hair was perfectly styled despite the late hour, and his charcoal gray suit was clearly custom-made, fitting his broad shoulders and lean frame with the precision that only came from serious money. But it was his eyes that truly captured Emma's attention, deep brown, almost black, with an intensity that seemed to see straight through her carefully constructed defenses. This was not just any man. Even in her panicked state, Emma recognized him from the newspapers, from the whispered conversations that stopped when certain people entered rooms. This was Vincent Romano, the man the media carefully referred to as a prominent businessman, while everyone in Chicago knew exactly what kind of business he really conducted. Vincent Romano was the king of the Chicago underworld, the man who controlled everything from the docks to the downtown restaurants, who commanded loyalty through a combination of respect and fear that had been generations in the making. He was dangerous, powerful, and absolutely the last person Emma wanted to be trapped in an elevator with. "Miss," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the small space. "Are you all right?" Emma tried to speak, tried to form words, but her panic had reached a crescendo that made coherent thought impossible. She was trapped in a small space with a man who could make people disappear with a phone call, and her phobia was combining with her terror to create a perfect storm of hysteria. I can't breathe," she gasped, pressing herself against the back wall of the elevator, as if she could somehow merge with the steel and disappear. Vincent stepped into the elevator, and the doors closed behind him with that same soft whisper. But instead of the menacing presence Emma expected, he moved with careful, deliberate slowness, as if approaching a frightened animal. "Hey," he said softly, his voice completely different from the commanding tone she'd imagined. "Look at me. Just look at me." Emma's eyes darted to his face, expecting to see coldness, calculation, the predatory gleam she'd read about in crime novels. Instead, she found something that shocked her to her core, genuine concern, and a gentleness that seemed completely at odds with everything she knew about Vincent Romano. "What's your name?" he asked, settling against the opposite wall, giving her as much space as the small elevator would allow. Emma," she managed to stutter. "Emma. That's a beautiful name." His voice was calm, soothing, like a therapist or a father comforting a scared child. "Emma, I need you to breathe with me, okay? Can you do that?" She shook her head frantically. I can't breathe. We're trapped, and We're not trapped," Vincent said firmly but gently. "This is just a temporary stop. The elevator will move again soon. But right now, I need you to focus on breathing. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Like this," he demonstrated, taking slow, deliberate breaths that seemed to fill the space with calm. Despite every rational thought screaming at her to be afraid of this man, Emma found herself trying to match his rhythm. "That's good," he encouraged. "You're doing great. Now, tell me something about yourself, Emma. What do you do for work?" I'm an accountant," she whispered, still struggling with each breath but finding that talking helped distract from the crushing walls. "An accountant. That's important work. Numbers, right? Everything has to add up perfectly." Vincent's voice carried a note of respect that surprised her. "I bet you're very good at it. You have that careful, precise look about you." Emma blinked at him through her panic. You're not what I expected." A small smile played at the corners of Vincent's mouth. "What did you expect?" "Someone scarier." Vincent's laugh was low and genuine. "I can be scary when I need to be. But right now, I'm just a man stuck in an elevator with a beautiful woman who's having a panic attack. And my job right now isn't to be scary. It's to help you feel safe." The word beautiful sent an unexpected flutter through Emma's chest, but she pushed it aside. This was Vincent Romano. He was probably just being kind because he was trapped with her, not because he actually found her attractive. "Why are you being so nice to me?" she asked, her breathing finally starting to slow. Vincent was quiet for a moment, studying her face in the red emergency lighting. Because you need someone to be nice to you right now. And because… He paused, seeming to consider his words carefully. Because I know what it's like to feel trapped. There was something in his voice, a note of vulnerability that seemed completely at odds with his reputation. Emma found herself really looking at him for the first time, seeing past the expensive suit and dangerous reputation to the man underneath. You do? Everyone thinks that having power means having freedom, Vincent said quietly. But sometimes the cage is just bigger and prettier. Sometimes you're trapped by expectations, by family obligations, by choices you made when you were too young to understand the consequences. Emma stared at him. This man who was supposed to be a monster, speaking about feeling trapped with a sincerity that made her heart ache. I never thought about it that way. Most people don't. Vincent's eyes met hers, and Emma felt something shift between them, a recognition, a connection that had nothing to do with their circumstances and everything to do with two souls who understood what it meant to feel caged. The elevator suddenly lurched, and the normal lighting flickered back on. The familiar hum of machinery resumed, and Emma felt the gentle motion that indicated they were moving again. See? Vincent said with a smile that transformed his entire face. Just a temporary stop. But as the elevator began its ascent, Emma realized that something fundamental had changed in those few minutes of darkness. She'd seen behind the mask of the most feared man in Chicago, and he'd seen her at her most vulnerable. There was no going back from that kind of intimacy. What floor? Vincent asked, his hand hovering over the button panel. 28, Emma said, then hesitated. What about you? 35, penthouse. Of course he lived in the penthouse. But he pressed the button for the 28th floor first. As they rose through the building, Emma found herself stealing glances at Vincent, trying to reconcile the gentle man who had talked her through her panic attack with the dangerous figure she'd read about in newspapers. He caught her looking and smiled. Not the predatory grin she might have expected, but something warm and genuine that made her stomach flutter. Emma, he said as they approached her floor, would you have dinner with me? The question was so unexpected that Emma nearly laughed. You're asking me on a date? I'm asking if you'd like to have dinner with me, Vincent corrected gently. Tomorrow night. Somewhere quiet, somewhere safe. Somewhere we can talk without the threat of being trapped in small spaces. Emma's mind raced. This was insane. Vincent Romano was asking her out, and every rational part of her brain was screaming that this was a terrible idea. He was dangerous, powerful, completely outside her safe, predictable world. But he'd also been kind when she needed kindness, gentle when she needed gentleness. He'd seen her at her worst and hadn't judged her for it. I don't know, she said honestly. This is all very unexpected, Vincent supplied. That's one word for it. The elevator dinged softly as it reached the 28th floor. The doors slid open, revealing the familiar hallway that led to her office. Emma's safe, predictable world was waiting for her just beyond those doors. Think about it, Vincent said as she stepped out. If you decide you'd like to have dinner, I'll be at Rossetti's tomorrow at 8. It's a small Italian place on the north side. Quiet, family-owned, good food. If you don't come, I'll understand. Emma turned back to look at him. This man who had somehow managed to calm her fears and awaken something she hadn't even known was sleeping. Vincent, she said, using his name for the first time. Thank you for helping me in there. His smile was soft, genuine. Thank you for letting me. As the elevator doors closed between them, Emma stood in the hallway, her heart still racing, but now for entirely different reasons than claustrophobia. She'd just spent the most terrifying and confusing 20 minutes of her life trapped in an elevator with the most dangerous man in Chicago, and she was already wondering what she was going to wear to dinner. Tomorrow night, Emma spent the entire night staring at her bedroom ceiling, replaying every moment of her encounter with Vincent Romano. Her small apartment, a tidy one-bedroom in a safe neighborhood that reflected her careful, controlled lifestyle, felt different somehow, as if the very air had been charged by the memory of those intense brown eyes and that unexpectedly gentle voice. She'd always prided herself on being rational, on making decisions based on logic rather than emotion. It was what made her good at her job, what had helped her build a stable, if solitary, life after the chaos of her childhood. But nothing about her reaction to Vincent Romano was rational. By morning, Emma had convinced herself that the dinner invitation had been a moment of madness, a strange byproduct of their shared trauma in the elevator. Surely a man like Vincent Romano didn't actually date women like her, quiet. Accountants who lived alone with their books and their carefully maintained routines. But as she went through her morning ritual, coffee at exactly 7:15, news at 7:30, out the door by 8 hours, Emma found her thoughts constantly drifting back to the way Vincent had looked at her, as if she were something precious rather than ordinary. No one had ever looked at her that way before. At work, Emma tried to lose herself in the familiar comfort of numbers and spreadsheets, but concentration proved impossible. Her colleague Sarah, a bubbly blonde who handled the firm's smaller accounts, noticed her distraction immediately. "You look like you didn't sleep," Sarah observed, perching on the edge of Emma's desk with her usual casual disregard for professional boundaries. "Hot date last night?" Emma nearly choked on her coffee. "What? No, of course not." "Emma Chen, you are the worst liar I've ever met," Sarah said with a grin. "Your face is doing that thing where you get all red and flustered." "Spill." "There's nothing to spill," Emma insisted, but she could feel her cheeks burning. "I just got stuck in an elevator yesterday evening. It was stressful." "Stuck in an elevator?" "Oh no, with your claustrophobia? That must have been awful." Sarah's expression immediately shifted to concern. "Were you alone?" "No, there was someone else there." "Someone else?" Sarah's eyebrows shot up. Someone else who happens to be male and attractive, judging by that blush?" Emma sighed, knowing that Sarah wouldn't let this go. Her colleague was like a dog with a bone when it came to Emma's non-existent love life, constantly trying to set her up with various men who inevitably found Emma too quiet. "Too serious, too boring. It doesn't matter," Emma said firmly. "Nothing's going to happen. Why not?" "Emma, you're 26 years old. You're beautiful, you're smart, and you haven't been on a date since." "Well, since I've known you. When was the last time you took a chance on something?" The question hit closer to home than Sarah could have known. When was the last time Emma had taken a chance on anything? She'd built her entire adult life around avoiding risks, around staying safe and predictable. But where had that gotten her? She was successful, financially stable, and completely alone. "It's complicated," Emma said finally. "The best things usually are." Sarah studied Emma's face with the intensity of someone who'd made it her mission to crack the mystery of her reserved colleague. "Emma, I've watched you for 3 years. You come to work, you go home, you repeat. You're like a beautiful ghost haunting your own life. Maybe it's time to try living it instead." The words stung because they were true. Emma had been so focused on avoiding pain, on preventing the kind of abandonment and chaos that had defined her childhood, that she'd forgotten how to actually live. "What if it goes wrong?" Emma asked quietly. "What if it goes right?" Sarah countered. "What if this is exactly what you need?" Emma spent the rest of the day wrestling with Sarah's words and her own conflicted feelings. Part of her, the rational, careful part, insisted that getting involved with Vincent Romano was the height of foolishness. He was dangerous, powerful, and moved in a world that could destroy her quiet life without a second thought. But another part of her, a part that had been dormant for so long she'd almost forgotten it existed, whispered that maybe danger wasn't always a bad thing. Maybe sometimes you had to risk everything to gain something worth having. As evening approached, Emma found herself standing in front of her closet, staring at her collection of conservative suits and sensible dresses. She'd never owned anything that could be considered remotely seductive or glamorous. Her wardrobe was a reflection of her life, safe, practical, designed to help her blend into the background. But tonight, if she was going to do this insane thing, she wanted to look like a woman worth pursuing. She wanted to see that look in Vincent's eyes again, the one that had made her feel beautiful and desired for the first time in her life. Emma pulled out the one dress that didn't quite fit her usual aesthetic, a deep blue wrap dress that her mother had bought her for Christmas 2 years ago. Emma had never worn it, considering it too form-fitting, too attention-grabbing. But now, as she slipped it on and looked at herself in the mirror, she saw a different woman looking back at her. The dress hugged her curves in all the right places, and the color brought out the warmth in her dark eyes. She let her hair down from its usual bun, allowing the long black waves to frame her face. A touch of makeup, more than her usual minimal effort, completed the transformation. Emma barely recognized herself. For the first time in years, she looked like a woman who might catch the attention of a man like Vincent Romano. Rossetti's was exactly what Vincent had promised: a small, family-owned Italian restaurant tucked away on a quiet street in Little Italy. The kind of place that didn't advertise, that relied on word of mouth and the loyalty of customers who'd been coming for decades. As Emma approached the entrance, she could see warm light spilling from the windows and hear the gentle murmur of conversation and laughter. She paused outside, her hand on the door handle, giving herself one last chance to change her mind. This was it. The moment where she either stepped into Vincent Romano's world or turned around and went back to her safe, predictable life. Emma took a deep breath and pushed open the door. The restaurant was intimate and cozy, with checkered tablecloths and the kind of authentic Italian atmosphere that couldn't be manufactured. A few couples were scattered throughout the dining room, and the scent of garlic and fresh herbs filled the air. Emma looked around nervously, wondering if Vincent had changed his mind, if this had all been some kind of elaborate joke. Then she saw him. Vincent was sitting at a corner table, partially hidden from the main dining room, and Emma's breath caught in her throat. He'd traded his business suit for dark jeans and a black sweater that emphasized his broad shoulders and lean frame. His hair was slightly less perfect than it had been in the elevator, as if he'd run his hands through it, and the overall effect was devastating. He looked up as she entered, and the smile that spread across his face was like sunrise after a long night. He stood immediately, moving toward her with that same careful grace she'd noticed in the elevator. "Emma?" he said, and her name sounded different in his voice, warmer, more intimate. "You came." "I almost didn't," she admitted honestly. "But you did. That's what matters." Vincent's eyes traveled over her appearance, and Emma saw appreciation and something deeper flicker in their depths. "You look beautiful." Emma felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Thank you. You look different, less intimidating," Vincent supplied with a wry smile. "I was going to say businessman-like, but intimidating works too." Vincent laughed, a rich sound that seemed to wrap around Emma like a warm embrace. "I thought you might be more comfortable if I looked less like I was about to foreclose on someone's mortgage." He led her to the corner table, pulling out her chair with old-fashioned courtesy that surprised her. As they settled across from each other, Emma noticed that their table offered privacy, while still allowing Vincent to keep an eye on the restaurant's entrance and exits. Even in this intimate setting, he remained alert, aware, a reminder of exactly who she was having dinner with. "Have you been here before?" Emma asked, looking around at the cozy interior. "Many times. The Rossetti family has owned this place for 40 years. They make the best ossobuco in the city, and they value discretion." Vincent's eyes met hers. "I thought you might appreciate somewhere quiet, somewhere we could talk without interruption." An older Italian woman approached their table, her face lighting up when she saw Vincent. "Vincent! It's been too long, caro mio. Mrs. Rossetti?" Vincent stood to embrace the woman, kissing both her cheeks in the traditional Italian greeting. "You look as beautiful as ever." "Flatterer," Mrs. Rossetti laughed, swatting at him playfully before turning her attention to Emma. "And who is this lovely young lady?" "This is Emma," Vincent said, his voice carrying a note of pride that made Emma's heart skip. "Emma, this is Mrs. Rossetti. She and her husband built this place from nothing." "It's wonderful to meet you," Emma said. Standing to shake the older woman's hand, Mrs. Rossetti studied Emma with the sharp eyes of someone who'd spent decades reading people. Ah, she's beautiful, Vincent. And she has kind eyes. I like her already. Mrs. Rossetti, Vincent said with mock sternness, you're embarrassing my guest. Good. A little embarrassment never hurt anyone. Mrs. Rossetti winked at Emma. You two sit. I'll bring you the special menu, the one we don't show to just anyone. As Mrs. Rossetti bustled away, Emma found herself smiling despite her nerves. She's wonderful. The Rossettis are good people. They've been like family to me since I was a kid. Vincent's expression grew thoughtful. My father used to bring me here when I was young. It was one of the few places where he could just be a man having dinner with his son instead of everything else. Emma heard the weight of history in his voice, the complexity of a life lived in the shadows of expectation and obligation. It must have been difficult growing up in your world. It was the only world I knew, Vincent said simply. But yes, it was difficult. There were expectations, responsibilities that most children never have to think about. I learned early that every choice has consequences, that every relationship is a potential liability. Is that what I am? Emma asked quietly. A potential liability? Vincent's eyes met hers and she saw something raw and honest in their depths. You're the first person in years who's made me forget about consequences. The admission hung between them, heavy with implication. Emma felt her heart racing, not from panic this time, but from something far more dangerous. Hope. Vincent, she said carefully, I need you to understand something. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be with someone like you. Someone like me? Someone powerful. Someone dangerous. Someone who lives in a world I don't understand. Emma's voice was barely above a whisper. I'm just an accountant, Vincent. I live alone. I work too much. And the most exciting thing that usually happens to me is finding an error in someone's tax return. Vincent reached across the table, covering her hand with his. His touch was warm, gentle, and Emma felt electricity shoot up her arm at the contact. Emma, he said, his voice intense, do you think I care about any of that? Do you think what you do for a living or how quiet your life has been matters to me? Doesn't it? What matters to me is the way you looked at me in that elevator, not with fear, but with understanding. What matters is that you're here, despite every rational reason to stay away. What matters is that when I look at you, I see someone real, someone genuine, in a world full of people who only show me what they think I want to see. Emma stared at him. This man who commanded an empire but spoke to her like she was the most important person in the world. This is crazy. The best things usually are, Vincent said, echoing Sarah's words from earlier. Emma, I'm not asking you to change your life overnight. I'm just asking you to give us, a chance. Mrs. Rossetti returned with wine and a selection of dishes that filled their table with incredible aromas. As they ate, the conversation flowed more easily than Emma had expected. Vincent asked about her work, her interests, her dreams, listening to her answers with the kind of focused attention that made her feel like the only person in the world. In return, he told her about his legitimate businesses, restaurants, construction companies, import operations that employed hundreds of people. He spoke about his desire to expand the legal side of his operations, to build something that could stand in the light rather than hide in the shadows. Why? Emma asked. Why change something that's clearly successful? Vincent was quiet for a moment, swirling the wine in his glass. Because I want to build something that lasts. Something I can be proud of. Something that... He paused, his eyes meeting hers. Something that would be worthy of the kind of woman I'd want to share it with. The implication was clear, and Emma felt her breath catch. Vincent, I know it's too soon to talk about the future, he said quickly. I know we barely know each other. But Emma, I need you to understand something. What happened in that elevator yesterday, that wasn't just chance. That was fate giving us both exactly what we needed. And what did we need? You needed someone to show you that it's safe to take risks, that not everyone will leave you. And I needed someone to remind me what it feels like to be seen as a man rather than a title. Emma stared at him, overwhelmed by the intensity of his words and the sincerity in his eyes. This was moving too fast, too intensely. but she couldn't deny the connection she felt to this man. "I'm scared," she admitted. "So am I," Vincent said, his honesty surprising her. "But I'm more scared of letting you walk away and spending the rest of my life wondering what might have been." As the evening wound down, Vincent walked Emma to her car, his hand resting gently on the small of her back. The simple touch sent warmth spreading through her entire body, and she found herself wishing the night didn't have to end. "Emma," Vincent said as they reached her car, "I want to see you again." "When? Tomorrow? The day after? Every day if you'll let me." His voice was soft but intense. "I know this is overwhelming. I know I'm asking a lot, but I meant what I said in there. You're not just another woman to me. You're something special, something worth fighting for." Emma looked up at him. This man who could have anyone he wanted, but was standing here asking her for a chance. Okay, I'll see you again. But Vincent, we take this slow. I need time to understand what I'm getting into." Vincent's smile was brilliant. "As slow as you need. I'm not going anywhere, Emma. I told you in that elevator that I'd never let you go, and I meant it." As Emma drove home, her mind reeling from the evening's revelations, she realized that her carefully controlled life had just been turned completely upside down. But for the first time in years, that didn't terrify her. It exhilarated her. Over the next 2 weeks, Emma's life transformed in ways she never could have imagined. Vincent was true to his word about taking things slow, but his version of slow was unlike anything Emma had ever experienced. He courted her with an old-world intensity that was both overwhelming and intoxicating. Flowers arrived at her office every morning, not the generic roses that most men send, but carefully chosen arrangements that reflected conversations they'd had. Peonies because she'd mentioned loving their scent, white orchids because he'd noticed her admiring them in a restaurant window, wildflowers because she'd told him about her childhood dream of living in the countryside. Their dates were equally thoughtful. Vincent seemed to have an uncanny ability to find experiences that pushed Emma gently outside her comfort zone without overwhelming her completely. A private cooking class where they learned to make fresh pasta from an elderly Italian chef who'd known Vincent's grandmother. A quiet evening at a jazz club where they sat in a secluded booth and talked until closing time. A morning spent at the Art Institute, where Vincent revealed an unexpected knowledge of Renaissance paintings, and Emma discovered she had strong opinions about modern sculpture. But it was the small moments that truly captured Emma's heart. The way Vincent always walked on the street side of the sidewalk, positioning himself between her and potential danger. How he remembered that she took her coffee with 2 sugars and no cream, and always had a cup waiting when he picked her up. The gentle way he helped her with her coat, his fingers brushing against her neck in a touch that was both innocent and electric. Emma found herself looking forward to his calls, to the sound of his voice asking about her day with genuine interest. She began to understand that beneath the dangerous reputation and commanding presence, Vincent Romano was simply a man who'd been starved for authentic connection, just as she had been. But their growing relationship wasn't without complications. Emma became acutely aware of the attention they attracted whenever they appeared in public together. She noticed the way conversations stopped when Vincent entered a room, the respectful nods from restaurant owners and the careful distance maintained by other patrons. She saw the subtle presence of his security team, always nearby but never intrusive, a constant reminder of the world Vincent inhabited. The most challenging moment came during their second week together, when they were having dinner at another small restaurant Vincent favored. Emma had been telling him about a particularly difficult client when she noticed his attention shift, his entire body going alert in a way that made her stomach clench with sudden fear. "Vincent?" she asked quietly. "It's fine," he said, his voice calm but his eyes scanning the restaurant. "Just some business associates who don't understand the concept of personal time." Emma turned slightly and saw 3 men in expensive suits standing near the entrance, their eyes fixed on Vincent with an intensity that made her skin crawl. They weren't approaching, but their presence felt like a threat hanging in the air. "Should we leave?" Emma asked. "No?" Vincent's voice carried a note of steel that reminded Emma exactly who she was dating. "They'll leave. They know better than to interrupt me when I'm with you." Sure enough, after a tense moment, the men nodded respectfully and left the restaurant. But the incident served as a stark reminder that Vincent's world came with dangers that Emma was only beginning to understand. "Does that happen often?" she asked once they were alone again. "Less than it used to," Vincent said carefully. "Emma, I want you to know that your safety is my highest priority. I would never put you in a situation where you could be hurt. But being with you automatically puts me in situations where I could be hurt, doesn't it?" Vincent was quiet for a long moment, and Emma could see the internal struggle playing out across his features. "Yes," he said finally, "it does. And if you want to walk away because of that, I'll understand." Emma studied his face, seeing the vulnerability beneath the controlled exterior. This was costing him something to admit, this acknowledgement that loving him came with risks. "I don't want to walk away," she said quietly. "But I need to understand what I'm getting into. I need you to be honest with me about your world, Vincent. All of it." That night, Vincent took Emma to his penthouse for the first time. The space was exactly what she'd expected. Luxurious, sophisticated, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of the Chicago skyline. But it was also surprisingly warm, filled with family photos and personal touches that spoke of a man who valued connection despite his dangerous profession. "This is beautiful," Emma said, moving to the windows to look out at the city lights. "It's home," Vincent said simply. Or it was. Lately, it's felt more like a very expensive hotel room. Why? "Because home isn't a place, Emma. It's a feeling. And I haven't felt at home anywhere until I started spending time with you." Emma turned to face him, her heart racing at the intensity in his voice. They'd been careful about physical contact, limiting themselves to gentle touches and brief kisses that left Emma wanting more. But standing here in his private space, with the city spread out below them and Vincent looking at her like she was everything he'd ever wanted, Emma felt her carefully maintained control beginning to slip. "Vincent," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know," he said, moving closer. "I feel it too." When he kissed her this time, it wasn't the gentle, careful kisses they'd shared before. This was deeper, more urgent, filled with 2 weeks of growing desire and emotional connection. Emma melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt as she kissed him back with a passion that surprised them both. "Emma," Vincent murmured against her lips. "Are you sure about this?" Instead of answering with words, Emma reached up and began unbuttoning his shirt, her fingers trembling slightly with nerves and anticipation. Vincent caught her hands, stilling them. "Once we cross this line, there's no going back," he said, his voice rough with desire. "I need you to be sure, because after tonight, you're mine, completely." The possessiveness in his voice should have frightened her, but instead, it sent heat pooling low in her belly. "I'm sure," she whispered. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." What followed was the most intense, passionate night of Emma's life. Vincent made love to her with a combination of tenderness and possession that left her breathless and transformed. He worshipped her body like she was something precious, something sacred, while claiming her so completely that Emma knew she would never be the same. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in Vincent's massive bed, Emma traced patterns on his chest and marveled at how right this felt. She'd spent her entire adult life avoiding emotional entanglements, but being with Vincent felt like coming home to a place she'd never known she was looking for. "Emma," Vincent said, his voice soft in the darkness, "I need to tell you something." "What?" "I love you." The words hung in the air between them, simple and profound. Emma felt tears prick her eyes, not from sadness but from the overwhelming rightness of hearing those words from this man. "I love you too," she whispered, and felt Vincent's arms tighten around her. "I meant what I said in the elevator," he murmured against her hair. "I'm never letting you go. Promise?" "I promise." But even as Emma drifted off to sleep in Vincent's arms, feeling safer and more loved than she ever had in her life, She couldn't shake the feeling that their happiness was fragile, that the world Vincent inhabited wouldn't give up its claim on him easily. She was right to be worried. The next morning, Emma woke to the sound of Vincent's phone ringing insistently. She felt him slip out of bed, heard his voice low and urgent as he took the call in the next room. When he returned, his expression was grim. "I have to go," he said, already reaching for his clothes. "There's a situation that requires my immediate attention." "What kind of situation?" Emma asked, sitting up and pulling the sheet around herself. Vincent paused in his dressing, his eyes meeting hers. "The kind that reminds me why most people in my position don't have relationships." Emma felt cold dread settle in her stomach. "Vincent, what's happening?" "Someone's been asking questions about you." "About us." Vincent's voice was carefully controlled, but Emma could see the anger burning in his eyes. "Someone who doesn't understand that you're off limits. What does that mean?" Vincent sat on the edge of the bed, taking her hands in his. "It means that our relationship has attracted attention from people who might try to use you to get to me. It means that I need to make it very clear that touching you would be the last mistake they ever make." Emma stared at him, the reality of her situation finally hitting her with full force. She wasn't just dating Vincent Romano. She was now a potential target for his enemies, a weakness that could be exploited. "Maybe I should go home," she said quietly. "Maybe we should take a break until this blows over." "No." Vincent's voice was firm, final. "Emma, running away won't make you safer. The only thing that will keep you safe is staying close to me, letting me protect you. But if being with me puts you at risk—" "You don't put me at risk," Vincent interrupted. "You make me stronger. You give me something worth fighting for." His hands cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Emma, I told you I would never let you go, and I meant it. We'll get through this together." As Vincent left to handle his situation, Emma remained in his penthouse, staring out at the city and trying to process how quickly her life had changed. 3 weeks ago, she'd been a quiet accountant with a predictable routine. Now she was in love with the most dangerous man in Chicago, and that love had made her a target. But as frightening as that realization was, Emma discovered something else. She wasn't willing to give up what she'd found with Vincent. For the first time in her life, she felt truly alive, truly loved, truly seen. Whatever dangers came with loving Vincent Romano, she would face them. Because some things were worth fighting for, and Vincent Romano was definitely one of them. The crisis that had pulled Vincent away turned out to be more serious than Emma had initially understood. For 3 days, she remained in his penthouse, under the watchful protection of his security team, while Vincent dealt with what he grimly referred to as a territorial dispute that got out of hand. Emma learned more about Vincent's world during those 3 days than she had in all their previous conversations combined. She met Marcus, Vincent's head of security, a former Marine with kind eyes and an unwavering loyalty to his boss. She was introduced to Sophia, Vincent's housekeeper, who had worked for the Romano family for 20 years and treated Vincent like the son she'd never had. And she began to understand the complex network of relationships, obligations, and unspoken rules that governed Vincent's life. "He's different since he met you," Sophia told Emma on the second day, as they sat in Vincent's kitchen sharing coffee and homemade biscotti. "Lighter somehow. More like the boy I remember before the weight of the family business settled on his shoulders." "What was he like as a child?" Emma asked, hungry for any insight into the man she'd fallen in love with. Sophia's eyes grew soft with memory. Serious even then. But he had this laugh, this wonderful, infectious laugh that could fill a room. His father used to say that Vincent felt everything too deeply, that it would either be his greatest strength or his greatest weakness. "And which do you think it is?" "Both," Sophia said simply. "His capacity for loyalty, for love, for protecting those he cares about, it's extraordinary. But it also makes him vulnerable in ways that his enemies don't always understand." Emma was beginning to grasp the truth of that statement. Vincent's love for her had created a potential weakness that his rivals might try to exploit. but it had also awakened something fierce and protective in him that made him more dangerous than ever. When Vincent finally returned on the third evening, Emma could see the exhaustion in his face, the weight of whatever he'd had to do to resolve the situation. But when he saw her waiting for him, his entire expression transformed. "Emma," he said, crossing the room in 3 quick strides and pulling her into his arms. "God, I missed you. Are you okay?" she asked, searching his face for signs of injury or distress. "I am now." Vincent held her tightly, as if reassuring himself that she was real, that she was safe. "It's over. The people who were asking questions about you have been discouraged from continuing their inquiries." Emma didn't ask what discouraged meant in Vincent's world. She was learning that there were some aspects of his business that she was better off not knowing in detail. "Vincent," she said, pulling back to look at him, "we need to talk." Something in her tone made him go still. "That sounds ominous." "Not ominous, just important." Emma took his hand, leading him to the couch where they'd spent so many evenings talking. "These past 3 days being here, meeting the people who work for you, learning about your world, it's made me realize something." Vincent's expression was carefully neutral, but Emma could see the tension in his shoulders. "What have you realized?" "That I can't keep 1 foot in my old life and 1 foot in yours. It's not fair to either of us, and it's not sustainable." Emma took a deep breath, gathering her courage for what she was about to say. "I want to be all in, Vincent. Completely, totally committed to this relationship and whatever it brings." The relief that flooded Vincent's face was so profound that Emma realized he'd been bracing himself for her to leave. "Emma, are you sure? Because once you make that choice, there's no going back to your quiet, safe life. Being with me means accepting that there will always be risks, always be people who might try to use you to get to me." "I know," Emma said firmly, "and I've decided that a life with risks but with you is better than a safe life without you." Vincent cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing over her cheekbones. "I love you so much it terrifies me sometimes." "Good," Emma said with a small smile. "I'd hate to be the only one who's terrified." That night, as they lay in bed together, Vincent told Emma about his plans for the future, his desire to legitimize more of his operations, to build something that could stand in the light rather than hide in the shadows. "I want to create a legacy that's about more than just power and fear," he said, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. "I want to build something that you could be proud to be part of." "I'm already proud to be part of your life," Emma said softly. "But I love that you want to build something better. For us," Vincent said. "For our future." The word future sent a thrill through Emma's chest. They were really doing this, planning a life together, despite all the obstacles and dangers. Over the following weeks, Emma began the process of truly integrating into Vincent's world. She met his business associates, learning to navigate the complex social dynamics of a community where respect was everything and loyalty was paramount. She attended family dinners with Vincent's extended network of cousins, aunts, and uncles, discovering that the Romano family was far more than just a criminal organization. They were a tight-knit community that took care of their own. Emma also began working with Vincent on his legitimate business ventures, using her accounting skills to help streamline operations and identify opportunities for expansion. She found that she had a natural talent for the strategic thinking that Vincent's world required, and he began relying on her insights more and more. "You're wasted as just an accountant," Vincent told her one evening as they reviewed plans for a new restaurant venture. "You have a mind for business, for seeing the big picture." "Maybe I just needed the right motivation," Emma replied, looking up from the financial projections she'd been analyzing. "And what's your motivation?" "Building something with you, creating a future that we can both be proud of." Vincent's smile was brilliant. "Have I mentioned lately that I love you?" "Only about 10 times today," Emma laughed. "But I don't mind hearing it again. I love you, Emma Chen. More than I ever thought it was possible to love another person." But their happiness was tested again 6 weeks later. When Emma's past collided unexpectedly with their present, She was leaving her old office. She'd finally given notice at the accounting firm, planning to work full-time with Vincent's businesses, when a familiar figure stepped out of the shadows. Emma? Emma Chen? Emma turned to see a man she hadn't seen in over 10 years, David Park, her college boyfriend who had broken her heart by leaving without explanation just before graduation. "David," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "What are you doing here?" "I've been looking for you," David said, his eyes taking in her expensive clothes and confident bearing. "You look different, successful." "What do you want, David?" "I want to talk. To explain why I left. To apologize for how I handled things." David stepped closer, and Emma instinctively stepped back. "I've thought about you every day for the past 10 years, Emma. I made the biggest mistake of my life when I walked away from you." "That was a long time ago," Emma said firmly. "I've moved on, have you? Because I heard some interesting things about who you've been spending time with lately." David's voice carried a note that made Emma's blood run cold. "Vincent Romano? Really, Emma? You're better than that." "You don't know anything about Vincent or about me," Emma said, anger flaring in her chest. "And you have no right to judge my choices." "I have every right to be concerned about someone I care about getting involved with a criminal," David shot back. "Emma, this man is dangerous. He's not the kind of person you build a life with." "The conversation is over," Emma said, turning to walk away. But David grabbed her arm, his grip tight enough to bruise. "Emma, wait! I'm trying to save you from making a terrible mistake." "Let go of me," Emma said, her voice deadly quiet. "Not until you listen to reason." David's words were cut off as a hand clamped down on his shoulder with enough force to make him gasp. Emma looked up to see Vincent standing behind David, his face a mask of controlled fury that was more terrifying than any display of anger could have been. "I believe the lady asked you to let go," Vincent said, his voice soft and dangerous. David released Emma's arm immediately, but his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "And you must be the famous Vincent Romano. I was just trying to talk some sense into Emma. By putting your hands on her without permission." Vincent's voice dropped even lower, and Emma could see David beginning to understand exactly how much danger he was in. "Vincent," Emma said quickly, stepping between the two men. "It's fine. He was just leaving." Vincent's eyes never left David's face. "Yes, he was. And he's never going to bother you again." "Are you, David?" David looked between Vincent and Emma, clearly weighing his options. Whatever he saw in Vincent's face convinced him that discretion was the better part of valor. "This isn't over, Emma," David said, backing away. "When you realize what kind of man you're really involved with, I'll be waiting." As David disappeared into the crowd, Vincent turned to Emma, his hands gentle as they examined her arm where David had grabbed her. "Did he hurt you?" Vincent asked, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. "I'm fine," Emma assured him. "Just some bruising." "Vincent, how did you know where to find me?" "Marcus has been keeping an eye on you," Vincent said, his attention still focused on her arm. "When he saw someone approach you aggressively, he called me." Emma looked around and spotted Marcus standing discreetly nearby, his eyes scanning the area for potential threats. She was beginning to understand that Vincent's protection of her was far more comprehensive than she'd realized. "Vincent," she said, placing her hand on his chest to get his attention. "Look at me." Vincent's eyes met hers, and she could see the storm of emotions swirling in their depths. Rage at David for touching her, fear that she might have been hurt, and something else that looked almost like vulnerability. "I'm okay," she said firmly, "and nothing David said changes how I feel about you or about us." "He's not wrong, you know," Vincent said quietly. "I am dangerous. Being with me does put you at risk." "Vincent Romano," Emma said, her voice strong and clear. "I chose you. I chose this life, this love, these risks, and I would choose them again, every single day." Vincent stared at her for a long moment, then pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly that Emma could barely breathe. "I love you," he whispered against her hair. I love you so much that sometimes I think it might actually kill me." "Good thing I love you back then," Emma murmured. "We can be terrified together." That night, as they lay in bed, Vincent made a confession that changed everything. "Emma," he said, his voice serious in the darkness, "I want to marry you." Emma's heart stopped. "What?" "I want to marry you. I want to make you my wife, officially and completely. I want the whole world to know that you belong to me and I belong to you." Emma turned in his arms, trying to see his face in the dim light. "Vincent, are you proposing to me?" "Not yet," he said with a small smile. "When I propose, it's going to be perfect, romantic, memorable. This is just me telling you my intentions, so you have time to get used to the idea." "And what if I don't want to get used to the idea?" Emma asked teasingly. Vincent's expression grew serious. "Then I'll spend however long it takes convincing you that we belong together, that what we have is worth making permanent." Emma studied his face, seeing the love and determination in his eyes. "You don't need to convince me, Vincent. I already know we belong together. So you'll marry me? When I ask properly?" "Yes," Emma said without hesitation. "Yes, I'll marry you." Vincent's kiss was soft and reverent, full of promises and dreams for their future. As they held each other in the darkness, Emma realized that her life had become something she never could have imagined. She'd gone from being a lonely accountant, afraid of taking risks, to being the woman who would marry the most powerful man in Chicago. It was terrifying and exhilarating and absolutely perfect. "Vincent," she whispered, "do you remember what you said to me in the elevator?" "That first day? I said a lot of things that day. You said you'd never let me go." Vincent's arms tightened around her, and I meant it. "I'll never let you go, Emma. Not ever. Promise?" "I promise. You're mine now, completely and forever, and I'm yours." Emma smiled in the darkness, feeling more secure and loved than she ever had in her life. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever dangers came with loving Vincent Romano, she would face them all gladly, because some promises were worth everything, and Vincent's promise to never let her go was definitely one of them. 3 months later, Vincent kept his word about the perfect proposal. He took Emma back to the Meridian Tower, to the very elevator where they'd first met. As the doors closed and they began their ascent, Vincent dropped to one knee and pulled out a ring that took Emma's breath away, a stunning vintage diamond surrounded by sapphires that caught the light like captured stars. "Emma Chen," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved me in this elevator. You showed me what it meant to be truly seen, truly loved. Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Through her tears, Emma could only nod. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, of course, yes." As Vincent slipped the ring onto her finger, Emma thought about how far they'd both come from that terrifying night when the elevator had stopped. They'd found love in the most unexpected place, with the most unexpected person. And as the elevator carried them upward, toward their future together, Emma knew that she was exactly where she belonged, in Vincent Romano's arms, in his heart, in his life, forever. If this story of unexpected love and unbreakable promises touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe for more incredible tales of finding love in the most unlikely places. Sometimes the most beautiful relationships begin with the most frightening moments, and sometimes being trapped is exactly what we need to set ourselves free. Remember, the best love stories aren't about perfect people finding each other. They're about two imperfect souls choosing to build something beautiful together, no matter what the world throws at them.